us here this morning. A few weeks ago went to lunch with a couple buddies, John and Dwayne, and one of the first things we said to each other is that it's so good to see you. We haven't probably spent time together in about 3 or 4 months, and when those times come, they're special. And then we sit down and we spend time catching up, laughing, joking, not having all meaningful conversation. But then along the way, we start to share about the reality of our lives. One person is expecting another child and how that starts to change their life and their family dynamic. Another one is working through kind of some unmet dreams and expectations and hopes that they had, and how their life is now starting to kind of change because of that. And then another just explaining even just some of the joys and the goodness that's happening in their life. And so as we work through our time of lunch, we wrap up, and in the end, again, we said, it was so good to see each other. And I walked away with this thought, isn't it good to be seen? Isn't it good to be seen? That for you and I, to be seen in our lives means something. It makes a difference for who you and I are. Whether it's a casual lunch with friends, whether it's recognition for a job well done, maybe it's appreciation for like the sacrifices that you might be making for someone or for something or on behalf of someone. Maybe it's acceptance by someone when you admit failure or weakness or the inability to achieve something. But while it can be many things, this idea of being seen, it could mean to be understood. It could mean that you are heard. It could mean that you're supported. To be seen is to be valued in our life. And I wonder this morning, do you feel seen? In the areas of your life, from just yourself to your relationships, to your work, do you feel seen? Do you feel valued? Do you feel supported? Do you feel heard? Do you feel encouraged? Or are there areas of your life in which you are not seen? Are there areas in which you feel unheard right now? Maybe you're working your tail off in some way, shape, or form, and it seems like nobody is recognizing, doesn't even care. Week in and week out, you're making sacrifices. Someone is asking you, yet they don't seem to appreciate it. You have ideas and thoughts of how things can change or be better, yet it doesn't seem like anyone might be listening. Do you feel seen right now? From your job to your marriage, to your relationships, to your parenting, I wonder for us this morning, do you feel seen? It's interesting. As culture studies this, as sociologists study us feeling seen, it seems to make quite a difference in how you and I actually interact and operate. Cigna said that 1 in 2 adults reported feeling alone or left out, and 58% said that they feel like no one truly knows them well. Any room you're in, over half of the people would feel alone. They would feel not seen. They would feel not cared for. They would feel not valued. They would feel outside of whatever that space is for. That there is loneliness behind however they're showing up in that space. And then it starts to move to the way that we operate. 54% of social media users say they only post the best parts of their lives. Anyone? No? I just stay off of it so that I'm not tempted to this, because I would do the same thing, even though they're struggling internally. Over half of the posts that you see on social media are people posting things, yet it's not like their life. It's not the fullness of how they're feeling or experiencing life. The moments that they're putting through pictures and curated text is not the full representation of their life. And maybe it's not social media. Maybe that's not the place, but maybe you're killing yourself at work for validation. Overworking more and more and more so that I can feel seen. You're married, yet when driving to work that day, you are hoping that you'll have a timely run-in to that other coworker who you seem to be attracted to. You're hoping to be seen. Your sense of shame is growing as you seem to kick that behavior, or you can't kick that behavior, or you're just exhausted from keeping secrets. to keep up, to project an image. You name drop, you exaggerate stories, you pass on correcting others when it benefits you. These are all ways in which we can try to be seen, to be valued, to be wanted, to be heard, because it does something to us when we're seen. UCLA put a bunch of effort into researching what happens when we feel seen, and it actually hits the reward system of our brain. That when we're seen, that part of our brain that says this is good and I want more of it lights up. When we feel valued, when there's a sense of encouragement, when we feel connected to something, when we feel appreciated, all of that aspects, the way in which we're seen tells us, our body, our brains, that we want more of that we desire to be seen. And so again, I asked this morning, do you feel seen? Because most importantly this morning, what I want to get to is that God sees you. Over and over again, if I just had one thing to say this morning, is that God sees you. And I'm not just going to end there. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that there is a God who loves and cares about the entirety of your life. That there is a God who there's nothing too small that he does not care about, and there's nothing too big. That the parts of your life that you might want to hide from others, there is a God who has more love than you can imagine, to where that part can actually just be a real part of your life, and that it doesn't have to spark shame and guilt and hiddenness, that you can actually embrace the things that are broken and not working, and that there is a God who sees it and cares and loves you entirely in spite of it. Now, right now, where you're at, everything that you are and everything that you are not, in the good, the bad, the ugly, again, these aspects in which you want to hide, God desires to be in relationship with you. That could be comforting. This idea that God can see you, he knows every part of you, to be known and seen even at your most broken, the parts that you don't want others to know about, that can be very encouraging. That can give a sense of rest and a sense of stillness and a sense of value. What it can also do, though, is it can put up walls of protection. Some are like, God sees me. I don't want to be seen. I was in Denver a few weeks ago, and I was staying with a friend, and somehow we got on telling jokes to each other, and he says there was a Catholic school of students, and they were going into the lunchroom, and a nun had wrote a note next to the plate of apples that said, "Only take one, God is watching." And so this little boy works through, he only takes one, and then there becomes a plate of cookies, so he writes a note to himself, and he says, "Take as many of you want because God's watching the apples." Not bad. God's watching. When we hear that, some of you, maybe that was used in a way for you to have like moralistic good behavior at some point in your life. God's watching you, so you better not. Remember, God's watching you, so when you, and it was a way of trying to help you become a person of some kind of goodness or moving in a certain direction. And so this idea that God is all-knowing, that God wants to be a part of our lives, even at the most broken, can be fearful. It can feel like a lot. You and I can navigate a life wondering if we could ever be fully seen in all the parts of our life, not just what is good. The book of Psalms, which we're working in these last few weeks, we'll wrap up next week, is what I would offer to you maybe the greatest book of the human experience. The book of Psalms is in the Old Testament, and there's 150 of them, and what it seems to be from the outside looking in is just a grab bag of prayers, songs, cries of war, and like people saying like, my enemies surround me, and crying out to God, even hoping that God would defend them in like very strong ways. But there's actually order to the book of Psalms that we're kind of grabbing at, because there's 150 of them. We're not getting to many, but it is a book in which you and I can find ourselves in. That no matter what you and I are navigating in our life, no matter how hard or painful it is, no matter how great or celebratory it is, you and I can find ourselves in the book of Psalms. And in that, believe that we can meet God there. That we can find a God who understands recognizes, knows the human experience, and can invite you and I to a more whole life, a more peaceful life, a life in which you and I are more seen. Psalm 139 starts off like this: "You have searched me, Lord, and know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand on me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain." Can you hear the psalmist saying that there is a God who sees him? There's a God who knows him, who searches him, who discerns, who is familiar with who this psalmist is. This word know in ancient terms, you and I tend to think towards knowledge. I know something, I have information about it, I have knowledge about it. The Hebrew word is yada, and it actually goes deeper to actually understand, to be intimate with something. The idea of intimacy. Now, when we hear the word intimacy, we can go many directions with it. We can think the ways in which couples relate to one another in marriage, that we are to be intimate with each other, and that is the fullness of knowing someone. That is the most vulnerable we can be. But this actually moves beyond all forms of intimacy that you and I can relate to someone else, as it is the way in which God desires relationship with you and I. That he would know us, and that in that you and I would have a chance at knowing him. Maybe you've heard the wordplay on intimacy is that into me you see. Into me you see. So to be intimate with someone is to know them, to know the aspects. Do you have anyone in your life that you know more than others, or that knows you? Maybe it's the friend who, I can imagine a few people, if they sat here today, I would call them the most dangerous person in the room, because they were with me from young teenager years all the way through college. They know all of my life, the parts that would be most embarrassing and I would not want to relive. Those people have an understanding and a knowledge about me that transcend most people. The greatest representation right now would be my wife and I. We know each other intimately, yet at the same time, I don't fully know my wife. My wife does not fully know me. That the knowledge that you and I can have of someone, or the knowledge that someone can have of us, still falls short of a God who wants to know us completely. The fullness of who we are. Into me you see. The writer continues, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you were there. If I make my bed in the depths, you were there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day. For darkness is as light to you, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. One of the things we pick up there at the end is that there is a God who has intentionally created you, that gave thought to who you are, to the timing of your life, to the wiring within you. And there's not a single place that you can go to where the darkness is too much, because he's there. And again, we can read this in two ways. One could be that everywhere you go, God is there, and that is great news. The other way that we can read it is that there's nowhere you can go without God being there, and that can be a scary thought. But if you pause for a moment, when is the last time you maybe felt so far from yourself, so far from goodness, so far from love, the thing that you did or do, continue to do, that you start to feel unloved because of, that you feel you're doing bad because of? God is there. That's a weird thought, isn't it? That there's not a moment in time that you could not be far enough away for God's outstretched hand of love to meet you in your life. I don't know about you, but that feels freeing. And I think it takes some work to get there. But what if we could understand this God that the psalmist writes about when we start to pick up certain behaviors and patterns in our life, when we start to look for certain ways to numb the hardship of our life, when we look for ways to move towards others in harmful ways to feel better about ourselves, when we find our vices to just make it through another day. What if there was a God that was communicated to all people that said, he knows, and he knows why, and he is there with you, even in those moments? What if you and I didn't have to experience shame when we're trying to navigate the challenge of our lives, of our world, that the pressures just keep pressing in? And I don't think that means we keep going on with those ways, but I think if we can't start with a God of love, how can we move towards a God of love? How can we actually become a person of love if we feel distant now from this God, as if we have done so bad that he never even wants to look me in the eyes? That I have gone too far off the edge, that I can't walk into that church because lightning will strike. You heard that one? Like, really, this is the way in which we start to understand God, as if he just sits up there and is like just a bully that kind of picks on people like, oh man, they suck. They need to get it together. That person, come on, like figure it out. No. He is in the depths. If I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. And then what starts to happen over time is this psalmist offers us something that's freeing for our souls. And we can start moving away from the moments of choosing ways for our own gain at the expense of others. That we less will compromise our own integrity for the sake of acceptance. That when causing harm to others through our own bitterness, resentment, and gossip, we can actually move towards grace and mercy and kindness. That instead of taking the way of comfort and saving face rather than speaking up or acting on behalf of someone marginalized, we actually move towards the hard things that put us in the line of fire. Like, we can become these people when we first and foremost can understand that there is a God of love and mercy that we cannot escape. The imagery I thought here is like a young teenager or something going to like that aged grandparent and admitting to something. Like, I don't know, I think about the kid that grabs like the grandparent's car while they're sleeping and goes out for a joyride and, does something to it, the car gets scratched, and then the next morning, like they're dreading that they have to admit to what they've done. And they walk up to the grandparent nervous, not knowing what to say, trembling, I'm gonna get in trouble. And as they start to speak the words, the grandparent just says, I know, it's okay, I know. Like it's the grace of the wise old person that can actually meet us in any single part of our life that feels too far off. And they just know, and they can still see them, and they can offer grace. Listen how the author responds to God, and then inviting us to respond the same way. I praise you, God, because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. What if the marriage too far gone knew that there was a God who saw them and the weight of it all and loved them, removing the shame of asking for help amidst the embarrassment of the choices in which they've made? What if the teenager who is looking for love in all the wrong places knew that there was a God who saw them in the brokenness of it all and loved them, offering the loving embrace that gives them purpose beyond their own desires? What if the man numbing his pain with success and busyness knew there was a God who saw him in the exhaustion of it all and loved him, inviting him into rest that doesn't have to be earned? What if the woman carrying the silent grief of miscarriage knew there was a God who saw her in the ache of it all and loved her, holding her sorrow with tenderness and promising that she's not alone? What if the college student crushed by anxiety and self-doubt knew there was a God who saw them in the swirl of it all and loved them, speaking peace to their inner storm and calling them beloved? What if the person who has experienced abandonment and degradation from an early age knew there was a God who saw them in the abusive cycle of it all and loved them, has healing and compassion for them that leads to freedom? What if a part of your story right now was to hear that there is a God who sees you, even in that time, even when doing that thing, even when thinking about? There is not a place in which you can go that outstretches or outruns God's love and the relational dynamic that he wants to have with you, to invite you into a life of wholeness and healing and goodness and peace and love. There is nothing that can separate you and I from the love of God. And what starts to happen, I love James Baldwin. He was a writer and quite a prophetic social critic. He says this: love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. A God who loves you, a God who sees every aspect of your life, this idea of love moving towards you means that you do not have to wear a mask. When you show up to work, when you wake in the morning to your spouse, when you go on that hopeful date after the few before it have failed, when these things are happening, you actually get to show up who you are. You actually get to be someone that you want to be in every room, that the insecurities that you carry into spaces can actually fall off, that the ways in which you try to contort your image with other people so that they see you in a certain way, you don't have to spend that energy anymore, because you know that you can't live within it either. The ways in which you are trying to uphold certain parts of your life by your own energy that are causing grief and exhaustion, they do not have to be there. And we can be people that then agree with the psalmist and say, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. You see, when we can move towards a God of love, we can actually become a person who's courageous enough to say, God, search me. What are the offensive ways inside of me? And I know you want this because you wish more people did this. You wish the people who are causing massive harm and destruction and abuse and chaos, you wish they would sit and they would be courageous enough to say, God, show me the ways in which I am not living into goodness and beauty. And that God would speak to them in a way to where they would lay their power down, to where they would stop abusing, to where they would recognize the ways in which they're trying to control everything out of their own brokenness, causing massive harm to other people. What if you and I could believe and move towards a God of love to say, God, search me. Where do you want to do more work in my life so that I can join you in your mission towards other people? Where must I forgive? Where must I extend mercy? Where are you inviting me to be generous? Where are you inviting me to take up this idea that I can be whole and loved even if I fail at this or that? What are the areas in your life right now in which it seems it would be helpful that God would move in and say, it's okay. I am there with you. I'm there with you. It seems that the psalmist settles into being seen by God. So what I want to do this morning, just to wrap up here, is I'm just going to share a little bit about Emotionally Focused. You have the cards there on your seats. If you haven't, again, if you can make it first and second, I would really encourage you to. 2018, my wife and I, Caitlin, we drove down to Santa Monica to something called Faith Walking, which is now Emotionally Focused. Church was holding it. I knew a few people in my life that had been a part of this work for a long time, and as I watched their life, there was something different about them. There was something attractive to the way in which they led that seemed different than most other people I could see leading. And this was a time in our life where we were discerning church planning and taking a next step in our life towards what now is this. And as we got down there and we sat in this steamy room without AC on the strip of Santa Monica with about 30 other random people, we spent 2 days listening to some talks, moving off into times of solitude where we could just reflect on our own life, coming together and talking about these experiences that are coming up with a few other people in a small group, and then taking a break and coming back for another talk and going into silence and solitude and then going into a small group and doing that about 5 times over. One of the things that came up in that time amongst many was this experience that I remembered when I was 12. This always still feels somewhat embarrassing and vulnerable to share, no matter how many times I share it. I was 12, and it was a Friday night, and I called a few friends to hang out, and 3 consecutive times was a no, I'm busy, can't hang out, whatever it is. And the 4th one I call, I learned that he's going to a birthday party where the other 3 that I already called were going to also. And that was, I don't know if that's the first time, that definitely wasn't the last time, but that was a moment that it seemed that God brought me back to in this space in which I felt left out. I felt like I wasn't good enough to be invited to this birthday party. And then what happens is I make a meaning. I'm not good enough. They don't want me there. I could keep going down the list of things we start to make up. And because I'm a young 12-year-old boy, what do I need to do at that point? I need to make something up so that I can get through the rest of life. I need to make sense of this situation and agree to something so that I can continue to move through experiences like this. And so one of the things I did not know that I was making and agreeing to was that I will never let people see who I really am so that I can't be turned down for who I really am. It'd be easier to manage and create an image of myself and let that be rejected than my actual self. And if I could better manage who I am and present something, I could figure out what people want me to be so that I could more oftentimes be accepted and invited in. You guys see it? You hear that? You have this in your life. You have many instances of this in your life. The way in which you learn to protect yourself at some point starts to fall apart. You know who doesn't need me managing my image? My wife. You know who doesn't need me projecting some expectation that I think others have of me so that I'll be liked? My kids. You know who really does not want me to just show up and please and is you. Like how could you effectively lead something well if you're not even yourself while leading it? We have these stories. These are the things that we bring into life with God. So therefore, what tends to happen if we can't do these, we're offering God something that's not our real life either. We become an imaginary self that we think we need to be. The good news in this is that there is a way forward in which we can revisit these formative experiences that we've had in our life, offer them to God in a way that he can rewrite narratives so that we can move forward in our lives more whole. So that we can actually be the people that God has invited us to become. The people who can walk into rooms and feel secure. That we can be whole and move towards people and offer what we have and know what we can't offer because that's not who we are. Where we can celebrate and praise other people for the work that God is doing in their life or what they're good at because that's them and I can be me. That you and I can actually relate to people in authority, in places of authority, though we learned early on that I cannot let anyone have authority in my life because it ends up abusing and it ends up hurting. And now we just live a life where we can't trust. This work is important for you and I to live more fully into the love that God has for you and I. For you and I to move towards this God of love so that the entirety of our lives can be opened up and to be examined. And this is a way in which Jesus walked the earth. This is why I bring this up. This isn't just a psychology session. We're not just getting in a room and praying, hoping that we can zap away our hard experiences in our life and all of a sudden we're miraculously good. This brings together the idea of self-differentiation. That you and I can actually be fully who we're supposed to be and yet still stay connected to other people without compromising who we're to be. That we can walk into spaces and be me, and they can be them, and I know where I stop and where they begin, where I don't have to take charge of a room all the time, and I can know the place. I don't have to hide in a room, and I can actually enter in. I don't have to find ways of trying to control and manipulate my life so that I feel good. That is Jesus. over and over again, a person that we can look at that walked fully in what it is to be loved and to know the fullness of love. And as you watch the scriptures, you can see the effect it had in the rooms that he entered. As he walked the streets, what it started to do with the people around him. As they tried to combat him, he could just be himself. He didn't have to compromise. He didn't have to exert anything more than who he was. He is the model of what it means to be fully human. And you and I, through work like this that is vulnerable, hard, it takes time out of our day, it costs us something. But isn't that what change and growth is? There's a cost to it. Are we willing to do something different than what we've done? That is what we're up to with Emotionally Focused. And I believe it's a way in which you and I can be the person that the psalmist writes about who can be seen. And that our reward center can operate more and more because we know that we can first and foremost be seen by a God who loves us. That is what it looks like to experience transformation. That is what it looks like for you and I to experience transformation first and foremost so that we can better participate in the transformation that God is doing in and around us. Or we can kind of keep just doing the same thing that hasn't fully worked yet either. Just hoping that one day things will get better. Hoping one day these things inside of me will just align magically. Hoping that one day all the things will just become peaceful. Those would be dreams. And as I try to tell my girls when they come in after a nightmare, that wasn't real. There are no monsters under the bed. What if we just faced reality and said, man, I have a past and a way in which I've been formed that God actually wants to deal with the real me. He wants to work with the real me. He wants to love the real me. What if we could do that? So that's my invitation to emotionally focus on first and second, and I believe it matters so much. So much. But for those that aren't going to do it and can't, I have a few things for us this week. Here's something to practice for you and I to be seen. What if, with someone you trust, you actually share something that is true about you, maybe even a bit vulnerable that you wouldn't share with most others? What if you tried that on this week? There's some people in this room who you've never shared something honestly about yourself with someone else. And you've done it because that's scary and it feels vulnerable, and you don't want to do that. But what if this is what it takes to be someone who says, here's my real life. Here's who I am. I am not going to be imaginary. I want God to actually work with who I am, and I want other people to see me for who I am also. What if you tried that on this week? You can choose how deep you go there. Have a conversation with God about the realities of your life, what you like, don't like, embarrassed about, happy about. That is a way of simplifying this idea of prayer. What if you just sat silently somewhere and just named things, whether in your head, out loud, on paper, as a way of talking with God of just, here's the reality of my life. What if you just did that for the next year? Over and over again, you just kind of talked and just said, here's what's going on, here's what hurts, here's what sucks, here's what I don't want, here's what I'd rather happen, here's what's going well. And what if that was a way in which you're actually working towards a God of love that sees you? Lastly, what if you offer to someone else the gift of seeing them? Take someone to coffee or lunch and listen more than you talk. Ask questions, encourage them. I don't know about you, but that's one of the hardest things to do, to actually listen. Because usually what starts to happen when someone's talking is we start to think about our response. We're like, all right, hurry, shut up. I have a good response to what you're saying. And we start thinking about that rather than listening to them. And what if we just sat there and we said, man, that's great. Tell me more. Hey, you just said that right there. What does that mean to you? No way. Tell me more about that experience. What if you just did that and actually just met someone right there they're at and you saw them? What if we tried these things on this week? Pick one and just do it as a way of seeing. I'm going to invite the worship team up. Lastly, we're going to sing together. And this is a way in which we can become people who are seen by God. As you know, as you drive in your car, as you wind your house down at night, as you play some hype music before your kickball game, I don't know, whatever you do, words and music actually forms us. it changes us, it gives us something to become, and that is a part of why we sing worship here on Sundays. It's a part of why we stand in praise. It's something that moves us towards something else beyond ourselves with words that we don't oftentimes have by ourselves. And so this is a way for us to be seen by naming things to God that we otherwise wouldn't name. And that we can be people in this to be, God, I want to be seen by you. And therefore we sing these certain songs. And then lastly, what we're going to do after that is just invite our prayer team forward. And for some of you this morning, I'll say a little bit more when I come back up as I think about it and pray about it a bit more. But there's some real things that only God can do in your life right now. That there's only something that God can do to meet you exactly in that place in which you feel unseen, and or is just a hidden part of your past or a secret part of your present. And it would be good to allow God just to say something to you in that place. And so when the prayer team comes up in a minute, again, I'll do another invitation. I wonder who needs prayer just to say, I want to be seen by God. You don't have to admit or confess your deepest, darkest secrets by any means. But what if God just wants to meet you this morning by someone just laying a hand on your shoulder and just asking God to bless you and to speak to you and to guide you and to move towards you in your life? So why don't we stand together? The kids' programming is still going down. I think they're probably throwing water balloons or doing something with water. So as we sing, may we be people who are open to being seen by God. And then after this song, I'll come back up, invite the prayer team forward, and then dismiss us. So let's sing together.